You know, there comes a moment in life where you just pause. You look around at everything and everyone in your orbit and you realize, not everyone deserves a seat at your table. Not because you think you're better than them. No, it's not arrogance. It's because you've worked way too hard for your peace to just hand it over like it's free. You've weathered storms nobody saw. You've patched up your own wounds with shaky hands and a tired heart. And now that you're finally standing, calm, steady, grounded, some people still try to drag you right back into the chaos they refuse to leave behind. And here's the thing. Toxic people? They don't always show up like villains in a movie. They don't always yell or curse or throw tantrums. Sometimes they smile. Sometimes they say all the right things. But you can feel it. You feel it in your body. You feel it in the way your thoughts get foggy after you talk to them. You feel it in the way you second-guess yourself after every conversation. And eventually, you understand, protecting your peace doesn't require a grand speech. It doesn't require a dramatic exit. It just takes one quiet, firm decision. A choice that says, I'm not available for this anymore. That's it. That's the boundary. No yelling. No explanation. Just clarity. The Stoics, they never sought revenge. They weren't trying to get the last word. What they wanted, what they lived for, was clarity. And in that clarity, they found freedom. Not freedom from other people, but freedom from the need to jump into every emotional storm that passed by. If that stillness speaks to you, if you feel like that's where you're headed, or maybe where you already are, then this video is for you. And if it resonates, maybe subscribe, not just for more content like this, but as a quiet way of saying, yeah, this is the life I'm choosing now. Let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed how much of your life has been shaped by the things you chose to respond to? Like, that one text you really didn't want to reply to but did anyway? That argument you didn't need to have, but somehow got pulled into? That one person you gave just one more chance, even though your gut told you not to? It all adds up. Not just in time, but in energy. In identity, in that slow erosion of your emotional foundation. Because here's the trap, toxic people don't always crash into your life like a wrecking ball. More often than not, they sneak in with something much sneakier, concern that looks like care, words that sound like love, actions that feel like obligation. But it's all bait. And the moment you react, whether it's with anger, defensiveness, or that long paragraph explaining yourself, you've already given them what they came for, your attention, your energy, your peace. Because that's the real prize for them. Not resolution, not connection, control. And here's the hard truth. They'll keep playing the same game, just with new vocabulary, new manipulation tactics, different masks. As long as you keep stepping back onto the field, they'll keep running the plays. But the Stoics? They figured this out long ago, long before we started calling it emotional boundaries or detachment. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." Think about that. Your response, that's your realm. That's where your power lives. It's not about being passive. It's about being precise. Because every time you react to something unworthy of your energy, you're voting against your own peace. You're giving someone else the keys to your mental space. And if they haven't earned it with trust, respect, or kindness, then why are they living there rent-free? Sometimes, silence is stronger than any comeback. Not the cold, dismissive kind of silence, but the centered kind. The kind that says, this doesn't deserve my energy. And when you start living from that place, when you stop explaining yourself just to make others comfortable, you begin to transform. You react less. You reflect more. You start realizing you're not responsible for fixing everyone's discomfort. Instead, you commit to preserving your own stillness. And guess what? People who thrive on reaction, they can't stand stillness. It unsettles them. They rely on emotional confusion to maintain control. But the moment you stop giving them your fire, they have nothing to burn. You pull away, and they feel that absence like a door closing. Not with a slam, but with a soft click. There's real freedom in not needing to be understood by the wrong people. There's quiet strength in no longer performing emotional labor for those who never reciprocated it. Socrates once said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." But he also taught by listening more than speaking, by knowing when words build and when they destroy. And once you begin to practice that kind of restraint, something shifts. Your energy becomes more centered, your relationships more intentional. You begin to feel the difference between conversations that energize you and those that leave you tired, confused, questioning yourself. You stop trying to be heard by people who never plan to listen. This is where philosophy becomes practice. Not in books, not in debates, but in tiny, daily decisions. That one moment when you decide, I don't need to respond to this. And you don't. You go for a walk instead. You call someone who lifts you up. You write. You build. You paint. You heal. You choose clarity over chaos. It seems small, but it's not. It builds into something huge. Like Plato said, the first and best victory is to conquer self. And really, what better victory is there than the one where you win back your own mind? The more you practice this way of living, this calm, grounded, intentional way of being, the easier it becomes. You start to master the pause. You begin to delay the reaction. And eventually, you just don't need the last word anymore. Because you've found something far better, inner calm. And from that place, even when someone tries to shake you, you don't move. Not because you're frozen, but because you've learned how to stay rooted. Your boundaries begin to form on their own. Not like walls built from bitterness or resentment, but like clear lines drawn in the sand with quiet self-respect. You don't need to explain those boundaries. You just live them. And the people who truly care about you, they'll feel the shift. Not as rejection, but as refinement. That's the thing most people don't realize. It's not about pushing people away. It's about choosing who gets to stay close. Who gets your time, your softness, your attention. Because those things, they're your currency. They're not unlimited. And when you start spending them wisely, your life begins to reflect that same discipline. You don't have to respond to every invitation into chaos. You don't have to correct every false narrative or chase every misjudgment. And you definitely don't have to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. You hold your silence. You guard your peace. You withdraw with grace. And you let the storm pass while you remain still. Because the real power? It was never in your reaction. It was in your ability to walk away and still remain whole. You're not obligated to play every emotional game you're invited to. Not every jab, every accusation, every passive-aggressive comment needs your attendance. But we're conditioned to believe otherwise. We're taught that strength is loud. That if someone disrespects you, you have to clap back. You have to prove your worth. That if someone attacks your character, you defend it with logic, with facts, with fire. And for a while, that might feel like power. It gives you that temporary rush, that quick dopamine spike, that feeling of, I told them. But it's a trap. Because when your peace depends on winning arguments, you're still handing your emotional control to someone else. They set the rules. You just keep playing. And the more you play, the more exhausted you become. The more reactive you are, the more you're pulled into their world, not your own. Eventually, you forget what you were even fighting for. Now imagine this. Someone pushes your buttons like they always have. They say that thing, the thing that used to make you explode. And this time, you don't. You pause. You notice the tension rise in your chest. You feel it, but you don't act on it. You breathe. You ground yourself. And you don't respond. And in that one small moment of stillness, you become more powerful than any comeback could ever make you. Because without your reaction, their power dissolves. You expose the game without saying a word. You hold up a mirror with your silence. And suddenly, even they begin to see it. Not because you told them, but because your absence of reaction becomes a reflection they can't ignore. Seneca said, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay." But the Stoics took it even further. They didn't just believe in pausing. They believed in rising above. In reaching such a level of calm and self-possession that the chaos couldn't even touch them anymore. That's not avoidance. That's detachment. And detachment doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you care better. It means you stop pouring energy into dysfunction, and you start investing that energy into your own growth. This is the shift. It's not about cutting people off in a rage. It's not about slamming doors or dramatic exits. It's about quietly becoming someone they can no longer reach. No confrontation. No announcement. Just space. Clean, intentional space. Carl Jung once said, "What you resist not only persists, but will grow in size." And it's true. When you fight dysfunction with dysfunction, when you argue with the manipulator, when you try to reason with the chaos, you feed it. You give it fuel. You give it life. But when you starve it, when you meet it with stillness, it shrinks. It loses its grip. And that's what makes detachment so powerful, so difficult, so transformative. Because it's not dramatic. It's disciplined. The people who depended on your reaction, they won't know what to do at first. They'll push harder, get louder, try every trick they've used in the past to hook you back in. But that's just noise. That's desperation disguised as confidence. The truth is, they don't miss you. They miss your reaction. They miss the way you used to spin in circles trying to make things right. They miss the emotional energy you used to pour into trying to be understood. And when they realize it's gone, really gone, that's when you reclaim your power. Plato once said, "The measure of a man is what he does with power." And that power? It's not just the kind you're handed in life. It's the kind you build within. The power to choose your response. The power to hold your peace. The power to know you could tear someone down with words, but choose not to. That kind of power doesn't need to shout. It stands still. It watches. It knows. Because not all storms are worth stepping into, especially when your only goal is to stay dry. You don't have to justify your peace. Let that sink in for a second. You don't owe anyone access to your mind, your time, your softness, just because they demand it. And the moment you truly realize that, something shifts inside of you. Your entire posture changes. You stop explaining your silence. You stop apologizing for choosing calm over chaos. You become the kind of person who doesn't flinch when poked, who doesn't break when tested, who doesn't entertain battles that leave nothing but emotional scars behind. This doesn't mean you're passive. In fact, it's the opposite. It means you've become deliberate, intentional. It means you've stopped letting your energy leak out through emotional holes created by other people's drama. You've learned to choose your battles. You've learned that not everything deserves your attention. You've learned that presence is precious. Aristotle taught that virtue lies in balance. Not in excess. Not in deficiency. But right in the middle. And that applies to emotional energy too. React too much, and you become a puppet, pulled and twisted by every word, every mood, every guilt trip. React too little, and you fade out of your own life. But when you find that balance, that sweet, still center, you become something else entirely. You become composed. You stop needing to respond to every text the moment it arrives. You stop writing long paragraphs trying to clarify yourself to people who were never listening. You stop seeking permission to feel what you feel or be who you are. Because now, you're no longer trying to convince people of your worth. You're living like it's already understood. Socrates once said that, "The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing." And in conflict, that rings especially true. You don't need to prove how smart you are. You don't need to win every argument. Sometimes, wisdom looks like silence. Sometimes, it looks like stepping back, not because you're weak or scared, but because you'd rather protect your mind than get caught in wreckage that was never yours to clean up. That way of being, it's not easy. It takes practice. Daily. But every time you choose breath over blame, stillness over sarcasm, silence over shouting, you reinforce this truth. You are no longer available for emotional games. Not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. And eventually, people stop inviting you to those games. They feel the shift. Even if they can't name it, even if they don't like it, they start to respect it. Because there is nothing more unsettling to someone who thrives on chaos than a person who refuses to react. So hold your peace like it's sacred, because it is. Don't trade it for temporary validation. Don't hand it over to people who treat it carelessly. Let them talk. Let them create their own stories. You've stopped playing. You're not reacting anymore. You're protecting. You're healing. You're growing. And more than anything, you're free. But let's be honest, why do we still feel guilty for protecting our peace? Why does saying no come with a side of apology? Somewhere along the way, we were taught that boundaries make us difficult. That distance is cold. That silence is somehow rude. So we wrap our truth in soft words. We explain. We over-explain. We dress our boundaries in disclaimers just to keep people comfortable. Even the ones who never once stopped to ask how we felt. But the Stoic? They don't chase validation. They don't argue with misunderstanding. They don't bend themselves into knots trying to be liked by people who only ever loved the version of them that had no boundaries. Instead, they step back. Not with bitterness, with clarity. Because when you understand the weight of your own peace, you stop offering it up like a party favor. You stop inviting everyone into your inner world just because they showed up with a smile. You begin to realize that preserving your well-being isn't selfish, it's self-awareness. Aristotle said, knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. And knowing yourself means learning when something feels off. Even if it's subtle, even if no one else notices. It's that quiet tension in your body after a joke that cuts too deep. It's that small voice that whispers, "This costs too much," when someone demands your time but never gives theirs. And still, you stay silent. You try not to seem dramatic. You try to keep the peace. But here's the truth, real boundaries aren't about keeping people out. They're about letting the right ones in. And sometimes, the firmest boundary is the one you don't speak out loud, but simply enforce. When you stop feeling the need to defend your limits, you carry yourself differently. You don't announce your absence. You just stop showing up where your presence was never honored. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And becoming who you truly are? It doesn't happen in debates. It happens in those small, quiet decisions. To say less. To walk away sooner. To choose peace over performance. That kind of silence, it's not emptiness. It's intention. It's not avoidance. It's wisdom. And for toxic people, that's terrifying. Because they don't get the reaction. They don't get closure. They don't get the emotional feedback loop they've come to expect. You've stepped out of their story and into your own. Plato once wrote, "The measure of a man is what he does with power." And the kind of power we're talking about here, it's not about control over others. It's about restraint. It's the power to know that yes, you could lash out. You could say everything that's on your mind, tear someone down with cold, brutal honesty, and yet, you choose not to. You choose silence. Not because you're afraid, but because you've finally learned to value your energy too much to waste it on anyone who doesn't deserve it. That kind of silence, it's not empty. It's intentional. There's something sacred about distance. It teaches you. It teaches others. It shows you who truly valued your presence, and who only valued your compliance. Who only liked you when you said yes, when you were easy, when you didn't challenge the dynamic. But now you're not as accessible. And that's not cruelty, it's growth. The people who genuinely care about you, they won't panic at your stillness. They won't interpret your boundaries as rejection. They'll understand. They'll respect it. They'll even meet you there. But the ones who only cared when you were convenient, they'll show themselves. And yes, that truth can sting. Because sometimes those people are the ones we've known the longest. The ones we've loved the most. But letting go of what no longer aligns with your peace isn't betrayal. It's alignment. Some relationships don't need a dramatic ending. No big moment. No big goodbye. They just quietly dissolve the moment you stop feeding them. That's not abandonment. That's maturity. That's stepping into the next version of yourself, the one who no longer begs for space to breathe. You just breathe. And suddenly, the people who once had constant access to you, they don't anymore. Not because you've built a wall, but because you've built a life. A peaceful one. A life where your energy isn't always being spent on repairing something someone else keeps breaking. So if you're sitting there, wondering whether it's time to stay or go, ask yourself, what will cost you more in the long run? Staying in a space that quietly steals your peace? Or walking away with your soul still intact? Aristotle said, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. And peace? Peace is a habit too. It's a choice you make over and over. Every time you don't respond. Every time you don't chase. Every time you choose quiet instead of conflict. And sometimes, that means walking away from people who once felt like home. Because here's the truth. Not everything that feels familiar is healthy. Sometimes the strongest thing you'll ever say is nothing at all. There's a moment when silence stops feeling like avoidance and starts feeling like wisdom. When it's no longer about being cold, it's about being clear. When you realize that if a conversation keeps leaving you feeling small, unseen, unheard, maybe the healthiest thing you can do is leave that conversation altogether. And you can. You can leave. You can let go. You don't need permission. You don't need someone to agree with your boundary for it to be valid. That moment, the one where you stop explaining your pain to people who were never really listening, that's when something inside you unlocks. That's the step the Stoics knew all along. That peace doesn't come from getting the last word. It doesn't come from being right. It comes from knowing you don't need to speak at all. You stop performing. You stop reacting. You stop proving. Not because you've stopped caring, but because you've started caring about yourself. And that stillness? It's powerful. It unsettles people who've only ever known how to relate to others through conflict. It confuses people who fed off your reactivity, who thrived on your guilt, your apologies, your over-explaining. They're no longer steering the ship. You are. Your stillness unnerves them. Your peace confuses them. And your composure? That becomes your loudest response. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And who you truly are can't be accessed by people who only ever loved the version of you that had no boundaries. Who you truly are doesn't need to be explained to those who were committed to misunderstanding you. This version of you, the one who pauses before reacting, who guards their energy, who chooses who gets to be close, this version of you is real. It's not bitter. It's not detached. It's awake. And the best part? You don't need to prove it to anyone. You don't need to post about it. You don't need to make an announcement. Your energy will speak for itself. It already is. People are starting to feel it. They don't know what's different, but they feel something's changed. You're not reacting like you used to. You're not rushing to explain anymore. You're not bending to make others comfortable while betraying your own needs. You're centered. And that's power. Plato said, real power lies in restraint. And now you get it. You don't need to fight. You don't need to correct every misjudgment or respond to every whisper. You just live. Quietly. Powerfully. Freely. You're not above anyone. You've just risen above needing to be pulled into the noise. And when you move like that, everything shifts. The way you speak. The way you listen. The way you don't respond. And those who truly care? They'll move with you. They'll match your peace. They'll respect your quiet. Because the ones meant for you won't need chaos to stay connected. They'll find you in the calm. They'll meet you in the stillness. And when they do, you'll finally know what peace really feels like. Until then, stay grounded. Keep walking the quiet path forward. This is your life. This is your mind. This is your peace. And you get to protect it. No permission needed.